Well, I'd like to officially welcome all of you to the Stockbridge Library, Museum, and Archives online poetry series. We are now in season 2 of the series, and our theme this season is the refuge of witnessing. And each week we meet here online and hear from amazing poets from across the country and sometimes even from abroad. And you know, it's a little bit of a combination here. Our poet today, Gunilla Kester, is joining us from Buffalo, however, does have some European background and roots. So Gunilla, thank you so much for being with us. And John Gillespie, I'd like to introduce you as well. John is the President Emeritus of the Board of Trustees of the Stockbridge Library, Museum, and Archives. And he is the inspiration for this entire series. John, thank you for everything you do to bring poetry to us all. Just a little background on our poet today, and then I'll turn the program over to the two of you. Gunilla Kester is a Swedish-born author. She has 2 chapbooks, Mysteries 1 and Time of Sand and Teeth. She's the co-editor with Gary O. Ross of The Still Empty Chair, More Writings Inspired by Flight 3407, and The Empty Chair, Love and Loss in the Wake of Flight 3407. She also has a CD, Songs of Healing and Hope, which is recorded with Cantor Susan Wheel, and it was released in 2007. In addition to all this, she teaches classical guitar at the Amherst School of Music. Dr. Kester has published many poems in Swedish anthologies, which I will not dare to attempt to pronounce out of complete respect for a language that I don't speak. And lastly, Gunilla was a Fulbright scholar, and we are very delighted to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us.
No, Wendy, thanks a lot. Yeah, I should ask Daniel, should we have a guitar accompaniment for the poetry? You know, just kind of have a multimedia. Maybe I'm putting him in a compromising position. So.
Well, Gunilla would have to do both, so that'd be kind of tricky.
No, that's all right. You know, this is, I don't remember the old Ed Sullivan days. I don't know. Some people, you know, they did the plates, you know, knew multiple skill sets.
One person band with the cymbals. And
yeah, that's right. That's right. Who was that guy? Yeah. I always remembered him. Why was he doing that? No, great. No, Gunilla, thank you for coming back. And, you know, always interested in what you can share and obviously your poetry. So let me just start out with, you know, where do you find refuge now? I can't even imagine over the last couple of years, but, you know, where are you finding refuge now in your life?
I was thinking about this a lot after listening to Rabbi Alex Lazarus Klein, who did this 2 weeks ago. And he said he found refuge in nature and he found refuge in language. And I don't think I have ever found refuge in language. I find language a challenge. Do you remember how Sigmund Freud said that the unconscious is a black stallion, of course a male horse, that runs away and takes you where you don't want to go? And I feel a little bit like that with my I'm bilingual now, I would say, between the 2 languages, though it's been a long march into the English language. But that it's always a challenge when you grapple with language. And you find that if you try to decide what this poem is going to be about this, it never works. I have drawers full of these drafts that don't become poetry. But when you allow the language itself, sounds, colors, rhythm, and then also meaning, and you surprise yourself, that's when it becomes interesting, I find. So that's really an answer to your question. I think my refuge most of all, I mean, I have a wonderful family, and I have at least I'm afraid to say, 8 guitars in this house.
Oh boy. So when you write poetry, are you writing in English or Swedish?
Oh, these days, since I started writing in America, I started right after 9/11.
Yeah.
I was driving home. I had a fight with my only friend in Buffalo at the time. We were new in town. And I got this feeling in my mouth. And I remembered being a kid on the beach in Sweden, very white sand. You got one sandwich, no butter. It was 2 pieces of bread, dark bread, with some cheese in between. And I invariably, you know me, like this, I dropped my sandwich in the sand, but you had nothing else to eat, so you ate it even with the sand. And it was that feeling, that gritty thing. So I went home and wrote my first poem in English called Time of Sand and Teeth.
Mm.
And yeah, my dentist likes it. He hung it up on his wall.
Yeah, and I never knew, so I'm not I'm not bilingual. I always wondered with bilingual is do you kind of like think in Swedish and then it translates to English? I'm just trying to figure out.
Yeah,
I guess the brain just automatically does that stuff, but
I think I dream in Swedish because if the phone rings in the middle of the night, I always answer, hello, hello, hello. It's not an English hello.
yeah.
Um, and I think sometimes if I'm reading Swedish, but most of the time now I write it in English.
Yeah, nice.
I mean, I know
So
of bilingual poets. There is a very famous poet, Venus Korregata, from Lebanon, and
yeah,
her mom spoke Arabic and her father spoke French. And so she writes the Arabic this way and the French this way on a piece of paper, and she says the poem begins in between the French and
yeah.
Arabic lines. So I have not tried that. I should give it a try.
So how does refuge, if it does, show up in your poetry?
Well, I think being raised in Europe, uh, we have a poetry tradition of witnessing and being part of history and seeing and reflecting on what's going on around us. You know the very famous Nobel Prize winning poet Czesław Milosz, who then lived here in America for decades. Nobel Prize winning author. He wrote some very interesting poems about the Jewish ghetto in Warsaw. He was there, he was witnessing what was happening to the Jews, and he was afraid that God, once God called him, would not be able to differentiate him from the Nazis because he wasn't Jewish. So that's part of a theme in his poetry. But I think we were always raised to that artists of all kinds should be engaged in what's going on.
Yeah, great. So are there a couple poems you want to start us off with?
Sure. I actually wanted to start with 2 short poems, just as a little introduction to who I am and my background.
Yeah.
And the first one is very brief. It's called Descartes and I. And those of you who remember your history, René Descartes, the French philosopher, died 1650, had a famous short poem called Je pense, donc je suis, was his motto. I think, therefore I am. More famous maybe in Latin, cogito ergo sum. I'm sure you've all heard of that. And so I wrote my own version. Now, before I read it, I've wanted to mention, you may not know this, that it was a Swedish queen that killed the famous philosopher René Descartes. Well, she didn't really kill him, but she lured him from France, from Paris, all the way up to northern Stockholm, put him in a cold, drafty room in the big Swedish castle, and he promptly caught pneumonia and died. So that's kind of a funny story. Anyways, so I think, therefore I am, and this is what I wrote. Descartes and I, woman, mother, daughter, wife. Therefore, I write. And here's a new poem. It's called Family Story 1945. It's about the women in my family that I know about, and it was recently published in the American Journal of Poetry. Family Story 1945. Great-grandmother died boiling coffee, grinder's handle silky. She fell to the floor without a word, dark snow mixed in white hair. Grandmother, given away at 4 to a barren woman, a store full of bread. My mother in the earth's cellar, a mountain of dirty seed potatoes. Her job in the cold hole to remove the sprouts, those seeing eyes, wishing to grow into light. A man running through the forest, clanging a big cowbell. The war, he shouts, the war is over. Kriget är slut, fred, fred, peace at last. My mother stares up at him, asking, what war?
Ooh, okay.
So, because we just went to war
Yeah.
overnight.
Yeah.
I was thinking a lot about this. Of course, everybody over there, they are much more concerned than I feel I have felt here. But it might come closer here too. But for us in Europe, it's very scary times. So I wrote this poem not yesterday, 2 days ago. It's called We Dreamed the End of the World.
Mm.
We dreamed the end of the world. Back then traced a shape, round female letter, gourd, ground, grail. In the smoky tavern by the sloping creek, a woman baking bread, singing. A song we didn't know about the first war, its poets dead, quaint souvenirs from a lost century, words cut open like trenches. Second war closing in, crime without a name. A man sang, aiming his machine gun at the neighbor's billowing sheets. A woman driving him mad, wouldn't let him sleep, wouldn't stop pleading with him to shoot, to kill her, after all his fellow soldiers had raped her until they went soft, used sticks, guns, bottles. She looked like his sister or mother before he crossed north.
Wow. Woo. I think the creative juices are flowing. I think, no, very nice. Very nice. Wow.
Thank you. So here, many of you know I married into a Holocaust family. My mother-in-law, her mother died in Auschwitz when she was like 43 or something. She was murdered in Auschwitz. And when you have a family with these stories everywhere you go, any time of the day, that's sooner or later you will talk about those stories. And so here's a poem I wrote after meeting with one of Daniel's old aunts, who was in California at the time. This is her memory, but I wrote it my way. It's called Afternoon Tea. A name's a star. It shines long after the bearer is gone. What was his name again? I had to marry him, you see, after the war. Between what countries again was that bridge located? Were we simply betrayed or sold or just unlucky when the German soldiers started shooting? And how many were we when we reached that bridge? Why did I and that young man, what was his name again, jump into a ditch and live when all the others were killed? I had to divorce my husband, when I found him after the war. The next day we found my sister alive, but mad, hiding in a barn.
So many dramatic memories.
This is
Oh.
what I feel about witnessing. I know in America right now there's a trend that we must speak from who we are, what we know, and not use our imagination and not impose our rhetoric or our words on other people. But I think for me, any kind of art should bridge differences and stimulate our imagination, and that we can, knowing fear and pain ourselves, we can then empathize or try to reach people who are in trouble. And also, all these stories about refugees, migrants. We have more migrants now. Illegal migrants in Europe is up 70% in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And I have seen now things in Sweden I have never seen growing up. I'm over 60. I have never seen beggars in the street of Sweden. And here's a poem I wrote about one of those. It was me and my daughter were out shopping in my hometown, and we saw this guy. And when we were done and we were gonna go home, I said, "No, we have to go back." And so this is the poem I wrote about that. It's called A Winter's Tale. And you can just imagine, New York City is on the same latitude as Madrid, Spain. So Sweden is like way up north and so much colder and darker than what we know, even here in Buffalo. A Winter's Tale. Head down, a man sits on the frozen asphalt. When he looks up, I see he's younger than my girls. A scar divides his face from his forehead down the left cheek. A whip, a sword, knife in the dark. A right-handed assailant from the looks of it. Our eyes meet, but he says nothing, doesn't move. I carry in my bra a $50 bill for emergencies, still warm when my hand touches his, avoiding the beggar's cup. Like all journeying children, he wants to know, are we there yet? When will we be home?
So let me ask you this about witnessing. You said a tradition of witnessing. Was that part of when you were growing up in Sweden? Was that part of your kind of family tradition, or is that something you kind of adopted on your own?
I think it was part of the culture, going
The
back
culture?
to say the famous poets of the First World War who wrote about the trenches and all that. And then the Second World War, somebody like Refuge, Thaddeus Roshevich is one of my favorite poets, wrote about those experiences. And of course, Sweden, we give out the Nobel Prize in Literature. Nobody can win the Nobel Prize unless he or she gets translated into Swedish. And so I had access from early on. My parents owned easily 6,000 books in our home where I grew up. You could just go and grab something. But it was also kind of a very international culture, that you knew poets from Africa, from China, from Europe. And I first met Walt Whitman in French living in Paris. I was 17. I had a good friend who loved Walt Whitman, and I had never heard of him. So she read me Walt Whitman in French. And then I came home and I read Walt Whitman in Swedish. And then not until I came here did I actually read him the way it was meant to be. So that's kind of a cool
Yeah.
circumferential way of getting to places. So.
Right. Right. Nice. Nice. So I always like to have a little break for the audience. I want to make sure if you have questions you want to ask, let me just say I put my email in the chat. If you want to be on our poetry mailing list, we only use it for poetry, nothing else. So if you want to do that, you could put your email in the chat and I'll add you to the list. But does anybody have any questions? We really want to make this interactive. Anyone? Donna, Patricia, Irene, Michael? Come on, don't let her off the hook. This is your time. Only kidding.
I ask her questions all the time, so I don't need to now.
Yeah, that's it. Daniel, you've got it. Wait, why don't we just ask Daniel? Daniel has all the, no, I'm kidding.
Michael had a question, I believe.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions? I don't think so.
I thought Michael did, but he seems
Yeah.
He's muted.
Michael and I are members in a writing group that meets weekly.
Okay.
Let's see if he can get over his tech problems there.
Yeah, you can't hear? Yeah, welcome to Zoom land.
There you go.
Am I muted? Irene?
Nope.
No, you're not muted.
Okay. Well, I often think about Gunilla's talents as a musician and how that interplays with her writing and her sense of rhythm. There's so much discipline in both, and I think that she has a very attuned ear because of music, and I just wondered if she wanted to comment on that. It seems that Gunilla, when you're not writing or reading poetry, you're playing music, you're studying music or performing.
Yeah, I do spend a lot of time. Studying is a good word for it. I'm not a professional guitarist by any means, but music runs in the family, and it was something I always wanted to do. And my dad, the doctor, said, no, you have to have a real job. He owned a nylon-stringed, Swedish-made built guitar that was quite good. And he said, you are not to touch it. And he kept it in a closet with clothes. So I became the closet guitarist. I remember even as a kid, when we lived still in an apartment, I would sneak in because, both my parents worked full time. I was a latchkey kid, and I would sneak into the closet and I would teach myself chords and just get to know the guitar. But I never learned proper technique until I was an adult. But I've come quite far. I enjoy it. I have studied for over 25 years with a master guitarist we have here in Buffalo called Mir Ali. And if you're bored sometime, go on YouTube and check out Mir Ali, and he'll wake you up in no time. He's very good at yelling at you. He yelled at me this morning, but
Right.
so
I'm not hearing anybody else, so why don't we keep moving on? So let me ask you this. Maybe for you or how you view other people, yeah, you must be moving your papers there, right next to your microphone. Yeah.
I think, Pat, excuse me, Pat, do you have a?
Yeah,
Pat,
I was just a little curious about the afternoon tea poem. Could you give us a little more background on that in terms of the person's circumstances?
Well, it was actually a story that came up when one of the survivors of the Holocaust who ended up in Toronto, who was, I don't think, related to our family, but to Daniel's father's best friend, was his mother. And when she died, we went up to the funeral. And afterwards, we all sat in this apartment having tea and talking. And this story came up about this bridge. And here were all the survivors, like different kids, adult children, and then their kids. And everybody had a different version of what actually happened at that bridge. And so it was the first time I thought somebody should write these things down. But I didn't feel like I should do it. But then sometimes I did write some of these scraps of, they're all fragments, and we don't know. So I tried to write them that way, that this is not a united story with a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Oh, that's so interesting. That's so interesting that you did it from that perspective of being a montage of legends about her.
Good. So Michael's microphone is not working. So if he throws a question in the chat box, I'll read it. If not, we'll go back to Gunilla.
And you guys can't hear me yet, right?
No, we can hear you now.
Oh my goodness.
You have a voice.
Gunilla is used to this. I have problems all the time with the headset and whatever's, but hi folks, and I'm sorry I was a few minutes late, but I just wanted to say I'm a big fan of Gunilla's work, and I do particularly around that, Gunilla, your poetry about the witnessing and always the poems you bring forward that tell an important story. And I think that particularly now, those stories are so important because we're losing a lot of history, and it's just great to see somebody that writes and can bring that forward. So I'm here because I appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Great stuff.
Well,
Fantastic.
Here's a poem that Michael probably helped me with, and it's the idea of witnessing as a mirroring. So I won't read the whole thing because it's very long, but I'll read the opening. And this too is a real memory from when I was young, and we got a train ticket for a month, and you just went from place to place and stayed in the cheapest motels, hotels, whatever you could find. They weren't always that great. So, but this is part of a series. It's called Mirror. Eyes, wake up. Dog's gone. Staircase narrow. Unreliable threshold. Handrails. Dust mixed in spit with chewing tobacco. Watch your step. No way to run toward the door, out into the open square. Streets sky wide. Dome filled with crying pigeons. Far away rattling trains. Distant hoot of ships. Floor covered with dirty luggage, ripped and cheap. Chalk marks. Frames breaking open like distorted mouths. No space to disturb the universe. Navigate a single light bulb burned out among cobwebs. To be young, to want to leave, to not know what to do. All these strangers waiting in line, keeping the door open, letting in more flies, and the heat, blinding light from outside. Stink from the toilet, shit and vomit. A mother, young daughter, blood down their chins, helpless. My Moroccan bag, wine red, heavy. I fling them my extra t-shirt, making the mime's gesture circling my face. Wind or crowd slam the door shut. Next to the propriétaire, keeper of keys, a wall. Chessboard of messages torn, thumbed, notes from underground, grief's crooked root hooked in the writing on that wall. One note, a woman's name scribbled across, torn from a passport. And just so you know, if you tear out a page from your passport, it's no longer valid, right, Daniel?
Oh boy. Yeah.
So if you're gonna write a love letter for somebody and tack it on the wall, don't use your passport.
All right. All right. That's good instructions for us. So let me ask you this before you read again. Do you think, either for you or other people, do you think people find refuge in witnessing, or there are so many things right now that are going on that maybe witnessing is like a light that shines too brightly and you have to turn away?
Well, I think I'm not sure I understand the question, but I think if we witness other people and we care about them, we just received 300 Afghan refugees in Buffalo that we are trying very hard to accommodate and find lodging for and help out in various ways. That this brings out good things in us, we who have so much. I mean, we live, many of us, in paradise here. And so to be able to share what we have can make us feel better. I think is that what you mean? So there's a refuge.
Yeah, I think probably I'm asking, do people get nourished by it? But I think I don't know. I was so saddened by what's going on in Ukraine. It's almost like the pot gets too filled and it starts to overflow. It's maybe it's hard for me to be open to witnessing because I just feel like all this news is just like flooding me. That's what I'm trying to say is there a point when it's not a refuge, when it's just so overwhelming you can't take it all in?
But that's where the poem begins.
There we go.
Always begins where you have no words for what
Yeah.
you are feeling. And you just used several really cool images. So I think you need to write this poem about what's overflowing and give words to it. I often find that the poems I write that I like afterwards are poems when something happened. I always get in trouble. I always ask Daniel. And then I don't know how to get out of it. And I say things that people, take offense to or whatever it is. And then the poems is a way of balancing the alienation.
Well, I like your statement. Poems start when there are no words. That's really profound.
Well, thank you. Now, I wanted to, before we are done here, I don't know much time. Last time I was here, which was last year, by the way, all of these I see 5 phenomenal poets in this chat room right now. Send your vita and your poems to John. They're a very friendly bunch, and then maybe you can come and read here too, because I've really enjoyed the experience, and I've now seen 3 other people read. But it is a difficult time, I agree, so I'd rather listen later. Now, last year, you asked me about the pandemic. Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and my answer at that time was that I thought it was too new and too drastic of an experience, and that we wouldn't have words for it yet, and that things have to kind of really sink in before we can understand them or try to write about it. And in that sense, I agree that you need to write about your own experiences. You can't just take somebody's experience on the surface value and try to write a good poem. That doesn't mean you can't empathize or sympathize with another and use your own, Weltanschauung to fill in the blank, so to speak, to build a bridge, to use a cliche. But so now what started happening to me in the early fall was that I had these really colorful, strange, vivid dreams. and I started writing them as poems. So I wanted to read 3 of those.
Yeah, great.
And I believe now that it was really my inner world coming to terms with the pandemic. That the first one, I was in this, they were carrying me in this net down the river, and I was dying. I mean, I knew I was dying in the dream. I call it From the Plague Year. When more people die than get sick, it means they are taken unaware away from home in midstream. It means dwarf castaway blooms, Helichrysum arenarium in lime soil, give a scent of curry, golden flowers, like papyrus. I feel water deepening around me. See, it's reflected in the sky. Birds swimming in and out of woven clouds. Blue stars in the weave, reeling like ships, smell of hyacinth and horses. Don't take me east, I whisper at the border. Prisons larger than castles, camps, blue flowers never last. You are going downstream. Here is a coin for your passage.
Love it.
And now with Ukraine and Russia, it seems even more relevant. But
Yeah.
in Sweden, of course, we grew up with the fear of the Russians. My grandfather patrolled on skis the border between Sweden and Finland, when the Soviets occupied Finland. So these are very close memories. And I remember as a kid, always, I didn't know then that I was allergic to milk. And they always forced the kids to have the milk because it was healthy. And they would have the porridge and they poured milk on it. And if I could have just eaten the porridge, I would have been fine. But I had no words to express what I was, I knew it would make me sick. And my father was a doctor, for crying out loud, but he was never home, so he never noticed, I guess. But the saying was always, eat your porridge or the Russians will come and get you.
Oh boy, here we go.
We are afraid of them. And, if they go into the Baltic countries, all hell will break loose. That's what I'm worried about. So here's another one of these poems that are kind of dreamlike. It mentions 2 creatures that are part of Swedish mythology. The tomte. Every house has a tomte, and you better make sure you feed your tomte and treat him or her nice, or things will start to disappear, because the tomte is mischievous, and he or she will hide things, or, things like that. So that's the tomte. So we always put out milk, actually, and porridge for the tomte. And then the other creature is called a Huldra. And the Huldra was a woman who was so beautiful on the front. She had long, wavy hair. She was very sexy, and she lived in the forest, and she would lure the lonely man who was in the forest, whether he was a lumberjack or just walking or hunting, and she would call him and then lure him into the woods, so he was completely lost, and then she would turn her back, and her back was a carved out empty tree trunk.
Woo.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay, I'm staying away from those woods.
Stay away from the Huldra.
Take it off the bucket list.
Yeah, Michael, I thought about it yesterday with Hermine's poem about the tree front and back. Anyways, this is the poem. The poem that woke me up. If I could see myself outside working in the garden, I would move the vase with the yellow tulips, open the window and shout to myself, don't cut the budding branches. Dig by the roots where the bumblebees nest. The Tomte and Huldra have left long ago. Your father is brewing his own aquavit. Run to find wormwood and bog myrtle. The owl has already flown. Snakes gone. Tell the young woman waiting, eyes open by the wall, to pour crumbs in the palm of her hand and fling them over the gate, to let the dough with honey and bitter herbs rise under her grandmother's cloth, to not take our fears and multiply them.
Very nice.
And here's the third one in that series. It was for a while there. And I think it was also homesickness. Now, when I read them, it's about my childhood. And every summer we spend in a very small fishing village in the very southwestern tip of Sweden. And it was very, as I remembered as a kid, it was very poor, quite wild. There were kids who hardly spoke Swedish, because you couldn't understand what they were saying, and they didn't own shoes. They went barefoot in the summers. So it's just intense to have had that part of my growing up. So this is really a poem, I may confess to you all, about God. I call it Pepper and Wine. Walk with me, old harbor naked and sad, smell of peach in our beech trees, leaves we ate every spring, no matter how bitter, nettles too, prickly like hedgehogs. Didn't I hear you long before I found you? Sails salty put away, a harvest already foreign where it grew. Accent added later by maps and travel, by accident, you may say. Geography, nothing but an old carpet sprayed with spit. Tiresome memories of men who left and left, tongues drooling, bowing to the god of adventure. I stood in the shade by the gate, watching them leave, carefree and laughing. Absence made me see things. When you took that long, didn't I know what you were doing? Weaving nests and nets to find me. When you finally asked, I was free to welcome both spice and grapes.
So do you have new work that you're going to publish soon? Where are you? I always like to ask that.
Yeah, I mean, I've had 10 poems published in the last half a year.
Yeah.
In various places, and of course for each one you'll get 10 rejections. I mean,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
goes with goes
Yeah.
with. But yes, fall was very productive. So there's some new stuff I'm working on.
Yeah.
And I have
Great.
always look at these loyal friends here who are helping me out and commenting, and we have quite a loyal group here in Buffalo. And Michael, you are now honorary Buffalonian, part of the group.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Gunilla, because I'm actually only 90 minutes away from you. So
really, where are you?
I'm in by Amherst, Massachusetts, in that area. Oh, not too far. One state away.
Maybe we can meet in person. That would be
Yeah.
nice. So
Yeah.
I do have some other poems. And you wanted more, or did you?
No, go. Listen, go for it. The clock is still running.
Okay, here's a rather longer poem.
Ooh.
So from that world, like if you can imagine, Sweden was not even Sweden, then it was Denmark, coming to think of it. But we are at the end of the Viking era. Christianity is slowly coming north into Scandinavia. What happened was that Christianity took over, the Viking culture disappeared, except in Iceland, that where they had a king already then. They have always been ahead of their times in Iceland. He understood and cultured that both could live side by side. So that's why the Icelandic sagas, the Edda, all these poems and texts were preserved in Iceland. So you had the Bible and the Christian stuff and the churches, but they also allowed the old culture to survive and live.
Yeah.
So that's really fantastic. That did not happen in Sweden. Actually, you can see, the Viking stones were usually rounded on the top, very large, and then they would make a pattern, usually with red, along the edge, and then write something very brief. You know how we call it lapidaric? Because it was written in lapis stone. So if you have to scratch each letter into stone, you're not going to use too many words. Now, this poem is about this change, and that there are people, when change happens, social change, or in this case in Ukraine, violent change, some people are better equipped somehow to adjust than others. So here's a poem called End of Our Long Boats. You know, the Viking ships, they rowed even all the way to America. End of our longboats. Look at him. Spices around his eyes only I can read, smeared far and wide. Tell me he's wrong. Earth is round. Still he may not return. Our harvest's gone. Every solstice brings fewer fish from the narrow sea. On a good day, we women gutted 1,000 herring, throwing bones and heads out the wide open holes in the walls, one in each direction for wind and watch. The sea brought riches, but terror too, pirates and thieves. Once a herd of wild horses broke loose and galloped right by us and toward where the moon share hangs when we ready for the big spring fires. We women gather driftwood for many tides and spread them to dry on higher ground by the winter boats. Covered in sails and nets, they look like the gray seals sleeping. People from the south, with their harsh mouth sounds, have bigger boats. Not yet as fast as ours, but times will come when they will outrun our rowers. The stranger from up north, with her black eyes and high cheeks, makes a salve of nettles and seaweed she barters to the sailors for hooks and nails. She even owns a needle she rents out for mending the nets quicker. Speed changes even love. I sit by the fire making tattoos, drawing in the dirt. Words come to me only in the morning and so fast. Knowing they are true, I gather a handful, even if I have no way yet of keeping them. The stranger tells me we must dry the sea in wooden vessels to collect salt like fruitful seeds. Where she comes from, they have mighty high places called mountains, and men die for lack of salt. Her fathers and brothers put it in their birch leaf tea and hunted big animals with crowns on their heads. Tomorrow, she will show me how to ferment barley and flavor it with bog myrtle and wormwood. Men of the sea fight over it. It will make us rich. Still I worry most about the new building high up in the dunes and what it will be used for. The stranger says it's built like a big cross. My man doesn't want to see. Looking backwards, he counts the waves. Thank you. That's quite a mouthful.
All these memories. All these memories. Yeah, lots of them.
So,
Very nice.
do we have time for one more? Or what's
Yeah. You got time for a few more, and then we will sign off.
Okay, so here's one. Both Daniel and I, and Daniel has spent years in Africa, and I have gone. We have a school in Ghana that we are involved in. It's a former student of mine when I was a professor at Marshall. What is it called, Daniel? I can't even think of the name. This
Franklin and
college.
Marshall.
Yeah. What?
Franklin and Marshall College.
Oh, Franklin and Marshall College. I taught there, and I had a student from Ghana who wanted to start a school, and etc., etc. And we have gone twice, Daniel and I, to teach there and to meet all the kids. And in Ghana, you know, they have over 400 languages, but they all kind of speak one language called Tree. And all white people, all foreigners, they call Obroni. You're an Obroni. So all of us white folks who were teaching at the school, there were college students, there were, you know, people of different kinds. We started calling each other, "Hey, Obroni, what are you having for breakfast?" You know, like just as a way to talk to each other. So here is a poem about meeting yourself on the road as an Obroni. Obroni, sister, please leave. I met my Obroni on the road, by the lilacs at the beach. Took a step to the side trying to pass. She stepped right with me, staying in my way. Tried to turn and run, but our shadows melted, so we danced on the path, me getting her rhythm, embraced and kissed her cheeks 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, left, right, left, the way we did at home on the boulevard where the filigree acacia filter the sun. She took my head then between her slender hands, looked me in the eye, and she kissed me slowly on the mouth, her lips gritty with salt from the sea, dripping sweet apricot and honeysuckle scents touching my cheek. Don't let your Obroni kiss you on your lips. I've been sick ever since, febrile, foreign, feverish, heavy things sticking to me, troubling things, fatigue and fear.
Don't let your brony kiss you on the lips. There you go.
Good advice.
I think you should put together a survival guide. You know, here are the 20 things you should do. When you run into an Obroni, just keep the lips hidden away.
Put on your mask.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So I thought I'll end with a poem that's one of my favorites that was written for my friend Cantor Susan Whaley, who died in the plane crash here in Buffalo. Because of her, I thought a lot about paradise. So here it is, Station Paradise. Even if no one really wants to go there, we are all strongly drawn to Eden. But is our map wrong? Eden cannot be such a peaceful place, all harmonic at a slow and graceful pace. It must welcome, God only knows, how many strangers every day, refugees, illegal immigrants, stowaways, lunatics, poets, dreamers, chimney sweepers, and at night too, in the dark, such confusion, thieves, mothers, the lost and the poor, all looking around and at each other, Truly paradise must be as busy as any major train station. What names will we choose in this noisy, synergistic harbor, so different from the garden we expected? Here, waiting's the deal, because we are only what we did or didn't do, while doing was our option. I think I'll sit down on a bench to watch my fellow travelers and pick up a newspaper. Any language will do, because here I can surely read them all. And since I am already dead, I will light a fragrant, lovely cigarette.
Very nice. Very nice.
Done.
Thank you.
Yeah, very nice.
For coming, and thanks for having me again.
Oh, absolutely. This is this is our weekly Buffalo Poetry Hour in Stockbridge, Mass, or in Maine, where I live. I live in Maine, so no, it's great. Absolutely fantastic. You've so many images. So many images. You're inspiring my future creative output with your imagery. And poems start when there are no words. I love it. I think I'm going to put that up on my wall somewhere. Yeah, really nice, really nice.
Yes,
Okay.
I want to second that. Thank you so much for reading for us today. Your work is very moving. And of course, much of it is so relevant to the state of the world today. So thank you. Thank you for being here with us.
Yeah.
Irene, did you want to say something? I see you waving, but you're muted. Irene is a terrific poet. You should really look into featuring. No, I can't hear you.
No. And we have to go because it's right at the hour mark. So no, thank you everyone. Gunilla, fantastic hour. Thank you so much. And I was going to say, I don't know who our next Buffalo poet is, but we'll find out, I guess. No, great. Thanks again, everyone. All right. Take care.
Thanks, Gunilla.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. Thanks, folks.
Yeah.
Nice meeting y'all.
Yeah.